Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie appeared to be the kind of couple that everyone admired. They were young, adventurous, and living a life that seemed too good to be true. Their social media accounts were filled with photos of stunning landscapes, wide smiles, and captions about chasing dreams. In July 2021, they set off on what they called the trip of a lifetime, driving a converted white van across the United States to explore national parks and share their journey online. For Gabby, this trip was more than just travel. It was a chance to build her brand, to show the world a story of love and freedom lived on the open road. In the beginning, everything looked perfect. They camped under starry skies, cooked meals by a small stove, and woke up to views most people only saw in postcards. Gabby posted videos filled with laughter, scenic shots, and messages about embracing life. To her followers, it looked like she was living the dream. But behind those images, reality was beginning to shift. Traveling for weeks in a small van created pressure neither of them had expected. Every little disagreement felt louder in the tight space, and every long, quiet drive gave time for resentment to grow. Friends later said they noticed something different in Gabby's voice during phone calls. Her once bright energy seemed dimmer, and her responses became shorter. When asked about Brian, she would quickly change the subject or say everything was fine. Brian, too, had changed. Once charming and easygoing, he began showing signs of frustration and control. Small things, like where to stop, what to post, or how to spend their money, turned into tense moments that left Gabby feeling uneasy. Still, she pushed forward, hoping the trip would bring them closer again. They drove from Florida to Colorado, stopping at breathtaking sights along the way, canyons, forests, and open deserts. Gabby often filmed herself smiling for the camera, hiding any trace of sadness. Each photo had to be perfect. She believed that keeping up the happy image would fix the problems that were beginning to tear them apart. But no picture could capture the growing tension in the van. At night, while the world thought they were enjoying peaceful campfires, arguments sometimes filled the silence. The long stretches of isolation only made things worse. Gabby was far from home, away from anyone she could turn to, relying completely on Brian for everything. That dependence made her vulnerable in ways she hadn't realized until it was too late. The last few posts on her account still looked joyful, smiles by a river, sunlight through the trees, but the comments stopped shortly after. Her followers didn't know it then, but those images would become haunting reminders of what was to come. Somewhere along that endless highway, the dream of freedom had started to turn into something darker, something that no filter could hide. And before anyone could understand what was happening, Gabby Petito vanished from the road she once loved. As the days went by with no word from Gabby, her family's concern grew into fear. She had always been close to her parents, calling or texting them every few days no matter where she was. When her mother received a short, oddly worded text message at the end of August, it didn't feel like Gabby's voice. The warmth and emojis she usually added were missing, replaced by a flat tone that made her mother's heart sink. She tried calling, but the calls went straight to voicemail. Days passed, then a week. The silence was unbearable. Meanwhile, fragments of information began to surface from people who had crossed paths with Gabby and Brian on their journey. Some campers mentioned hearing raised voices coming from their van late at night. Others recalled seeing Gabby looking distressed at a restaurant in Wyoming, her face red and tear-streaked as Brian argued with the staff. Each small detail painted a picture of tension building behind closed doors, far from the smiling images Gabby had shared online. Then came the body cam footage that shocked the world. On August 12th, a police officer in Moab, Utah, pulled the couple over after reports of a domestic disturbance. The video showed Gabby in tears, her voice trembling as she tried to explain that they had been fighting all morning. She blamed herself, saying she was stressed and anxious. Brian stood apart, calm and distant, insisting that everything was fine. The officer decided it was best for them to spend the night apart. Gabby kept the van while Brian stayed in a hotel. At the time, it seemed like a small argument blown out of proportion, but looking back, it was a warning sign of something much deeper. After that encounter, Gabby continued to post for a short time, but her followers noticed something different. The captions seemed less personal, almost forced. There were fewer photos of her face and more pictures of landscapes. Then suddenly the updates stopped altogether. By the end of August, she was no longer active online. Back in Florida, Brian returned home in the van on September 1st, alone. He didn't call Gabby's family, didn't offer any explanation, and didn't seem to be helping search for her. Instead, he quietly settled back into his parents' house. When Gabby's family tried reaching out to him, he ignored them. Their worry turned to panic, and they reported her missing on September 11th. The police arrived at the Laundrie residence, hoping for answers. But Brian refused to speak. Through his lawyer, he said nothing, offering no information about where Gabby might be. The van she had lived in, loved, and decorated with stickers was now evidence. Inside, investigators found signs that told a story of someone who had not planned to leave it behind. The image of the perfect couple had collapsed. The dream of van life had vanished. Now there were only questions and a silence that grew louder by the day. Something terrible had happened, and everyone could feel it. Gabby's disappearance quickly turned from a local missing person report into a nationwide obsession. Her story spread across television screens, social media platforms, and online communities. Thousands of strangers felt connected to her, drawn to the mystery of what happened to the cheerful young woman who had once shared her travels so openly. People began analyzing her Instagram posts, her YouTube videos, even her handwriting, searching for clues that might explain where she had gone. Every comment, every smile in a photo was examined as if it might hold a hidden message. Law enforcement agencies across multiple states joined the search. The FBI became involved, coordinating with park rangers and local police departments. They pieced together the route Gabby and Brian had taken, trying to narrow down the possible locations where she might have last been seen. Witnesses came forward saying they had spotted the couple in Wyoming, near Grand Teton National Park. One report described Gabby crying outside a restaurant after what looked like another argument with Brian. Another sighting placed their van near a remote campsite a few days later. At the same time, the public began to take action. Online investigators, ordinary people with laptops and determination, pored over footage from highway cameras, park live streams, and travel vlogs. A break came when a YouTube family, who had been documenting their own road trip, noticed something strange while reviewing their dashcam video. In the corner of the frame, parked on the side of a dirt road, was a white van with the same markings as Gabby's. The sighting was from late August, around the time she stopped communicating. The family shared the video with the FBI, and it became the lead everyone had been waiting for. Search teams were immediately dispatched to that area in Wyoming. Helicopters circled above, while ground teams combed through the thick brush and rocky terrain. The location was isolated and peaceful, a place that once might have been beautiful to explore. Now it carried an eerie silence. Investigators examined every inch, marking off zones, collecting items, and scanning the environment for signs of disturbance. Back in Florida, Brian had disappeared. His parents told police that he had gone hiking in a nearby reserve, taking only a backpack. Days turned into weeks with no sign of him. Search efforts expanded into swamps filled with snakes, alligators, and waist-deep water. It was a dangerous, exhausting mission. As his absence continued, speculation exploded online. Some believed he was hiding with help. Others thought he might have taken his own life. Meanwhile, forensic teams analyzed Gabby's van, uncovering traces of her DNA and items that indicated she had been living inside it until shortly before her disappearance. The evidence was stacking up, but without Brian, there were more questions than answers. The story that began as a couple's adventure had become a chilling mystery. Every hour that passed made it less likely that Gabby would be found alive, but her family and thousands of supporters refused to give up hope. The search in Grand Teton National Park came to a heartbreaking end when investigators discovered human remains near a quiet creek surrounded by dense trees and mountains. The scene was peaceful yet haunting, a place where nature stood still as though holding a terrible secret. The discovery was made just days after the YouTuber's video revealed the location of Gabby's van. Law enforcement quickly sealed off the area, and forensic experts began their work carefully, documenting every detail and collecting evidence that could explain what had happened there. Within hours, the news reached Gabby's family. Though the remains had not yet been officially identified, they knew in their hearts what the outcome would be. The hope they had held onto for weeks shattered in an instant. Soon after, the FBI confirmed what everyone feared. The body belonged to Gabby Petito. The autopsy revealed that she had died by strangulation, and the manner of death was ruled a homicide. The joyful young woman who had once shared her dreams and adventures with the world was gone. Her story now turned into a tragedy that would haunt millions. The nation reacted with shock and sorrow. Vigils were held across the country, candles lit in memory of a girl most had never met but somehow felt they knew. Her face filled television screens, news feeds, and posters. The story resonated deeply, not just because of its tragedy, but because it revealed the hidden darkness behind what looked like a perfect love story. For weeks, Gabby had been seen smiling in photos that now carried a painful weight. What once symbolized happiness had become evidence of a silent struggle. Attention turned immediately to Brian Laundrie, the only person who could explain what had happened. But he was gone. His parents told police that he had gone hiking in the Carlton Reserve, a vast stretch of swamp and wilderness in Florida. That announcement came days after he had already disappeared, making investigators question whether they had been told the truth. Search teams poured into the reserve, braving harsh conditions and dangerous wildlife. But there was no sign of Brian. Each day without progress made the mystery grow deeper. As media trucks lined the streets outside the Laundrie home, people demanded answers. Why had Brian returned home without Gabby? Why had he refused to speak to investigators? And why had his family stayed silent while the Petitos searched desperately for their daughter? The silence from the Laundrie family only fueled public anger. Protesters gathered outside their house, holding signs and chanting Gabby's name. Meanwhile, investigators continued their work behind the scenes. They traced phone records, reviewed bank transactions, and studied digital evidence from Gabby's social media. Everything pointed to a timeline that ended in Wyoming. The story that once began as an adventure between two young lovers had now become a nationwide hunt for the truth. The open road that had once promised freedom had turned into the path of a nightmare that no one could forget. Weeks after Gabby's remains were found, the search for Brian Laundrie consumed the nation. Every news outlet covered the manhunt, showing aerial footage of the Florida wilderness where police believed he was hiding. The Carlton Reserve stretched for miles, swampy, dangerous, and filled with thick brush that made searching nearly impossible. Dozens of officers, drones, and search dogs combed through the area, but day after day ended with nothing. Rain, flooding, and wildlife slowed the progress. The frustration grew as people began to wonder whether Brian had escaped, or if he was even still alive. His family maintained that he had gone hiking and never returned, but the timeline they gave raised questions. Why had they waited several days to report him missing? Why did his car reappear at their house after being seen near the reserve? To many following the case, it felt like too many coincidences. As online theories spread, some believed Brian had help. Others thought he had taken his own life to avoid facing what he had done. The speculation was endless, and each new rumor reignited public anger and curiosity. While search teams worked in the swamps, forensic analysts and investigators continued building the case. They reviewed Brian's journal entries, text messages, and digital footprints. The story that began as a road trip of love had become a documented descent into conflict, jealousy, and control. Investigators pieced together that Gabby's death had likely occurred just days after the argument at the Wyoming restaurant. The trail of evidence suggested that Brian had left her body in the remote area and driven the van all the way back to Florida as if nothing had happened. The thought of him returning home, eating dinner with his family, and refusing to help search for her sickened people across the country. Then, in late October, a shocking discovery changed everything. As water levels in the reserve dropped, a man walking with law enforcement found a dry bag and a notebook near a set of skeletal remains. Nearby were personal belongings later confirmed to be Brian's. The area had previously been submerged, which explained why search teams hadn't located it earlier. The FBI confirmed that the remains belonged to Brian Laundrie through dental records. The manhunt that had consumed so much attention was over, but the ending offered little peace. Inside the recovered notebook was a handwritten confession. In it, Brian admitted to killing Gabby after an argument spiraled out of control. He wrote that he had panicked and regretted what he had done, but didn't give a clear explanation of why it happened. The words were filled with excuses and sorrow, but they brought no closure to the people who had followed Gabby's story or to her grieving family. The confession didn't erase the pain or the questions that would never be fully answered. In the aftermath, Gabby Petito's story became a symbol, a warning about the hidden dangers behind seemingly perfect lives shared online. Her tragedy sparked conversations about domestic violence, control, and the difference between what people show and what they truly live through. The van life that had once promised endless freedom had ended in heartbreak. leaving behind a lasting reminder that sometimes the most beautiful stories hide the darkest truths.